Hello, Clement229 here with another Topic of the Week video. Christmas month continues on with another video game topic. This one over two of the most enigmatic characters in the BioShock universe, the Lutece twins. This week's topic was submitted by The Man Time Forgot, Tumblr user, The Man Time Forgot. And their topic was, what motivated the Luteces to help out Booker and Elizabeth in both the main game and in Burial at Sea? Now, unlike its previous two games, BioShock Infinite is very, very complicated. Yeah, the other ones could have plot twists, but they weren't. The plots were fairly straightforward. You went through BioShock 1, you knew what happened. You went through BioShock 2, you knew what happened. You go through BioShock Infinite, you're probably ending like, what the hell just happened? So, I'm going to give you a fair warning. I will be spoiling BioShock Infinite, BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea Episodes 1 and 2, and BioShock 1. Not BioShock 2, because that's pretty separate, in all honesty. But yeah, I'm not going to be holding back spoilers, because to explain, like, the Luteces have their hands in every single pot in BioShock Infinite. Like, they are everywhere. So to explain what they're doing, I have to explain everything else. But I do have my own theories on how this works and what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, so, just fair warning, spoilers. Now, to understand the motivation of the Luteces, we need to actually get back to what happens to the Luteces in their life. We need to know their characters, and some parts of their motivations are connected very strongly to their pasts together. So, going back as early as we can remember, I think the earliest thing that we have about them is one of Rosalind's voxophones talking about her dream. I saw the girl who was and was not myself, looking at a girl who was and was not myself. Which just seems to predate her contacting Robert in his other universe. Now they eventually found a way to talk to each other, and I don't know if they exactly worked together, if they both built it separately, but they created the Lutece device, allowing Robert to cross over into Rosalind's dimension, which led to him being totally out of it and bleeding like mad, requiring a ton of blood transfusions from Rosalind just to stay alive, and music. We know that this is the beginning of a very, very long team up of science and helping Comstock. I do think Rosalind met Comstock before. Rosalind met Comstock before she was able to get Robert into her dimension, because Comstock provided the funds, because he was, even before he met them, was a fairly influential pastor and was probably a manipulative bastard even back then. And as we know, going through the game, that Comstock is that universe's Booker. Crazy, huh? That universe's Booker accepted the baptism and basically missed the entire point of the Bible and went completely insane. Entirely insane. But he was able to get her the funds to create the Lutece device, which allowed her to bring Robert to her, and then they basically helped Comstock designing the Lutece. They perfected the Lutece device eventually, because we know that the device, I don't know if this is the final version or if this was just prototype versions that Comstock used, but it made him sterile, which is why he needed to get Anna from the Booker that we play as from his dimension, so he can have an heir who is technically his blood heir, but technically wasn't. And then his life was ending. He was basically degenerating faster, which made him appear older, because Comstock's only 38, which, I mean, I had my idea of time travel, of he's Booker from the future, but no, actually no, it's legitimately, he's 38. He's the same age as our Booker, but he looks older because the Lutece, constant use of the Lutece device, or at the very least, an older version of the Lutece device, just destroyed his body. It's like in the movie Timeline, where instead of it just basically photocopying your body, it was literally just, it was rapid aging him. It essentially destroyed his body, which is kind of what the timeline is, but with a specific side effect of infertility and advanced aging, solid snake syndrome. Why did I even mention that? So, so with all the funds of Comstock, they created Columbia. Rosalind and Robert created Columbia. We know this is true across many different universes. Whether it's Robert who is the one who did it, or Rosalind was the one who did it. The timelines get really wacky. But we know our Lutece did create the Lutece particle, which allowed Columbia to stay in the air. So, just as a side note, the Luteces are responsible for everything that happened. Everything. Like, they were responsible for Columbia, they were responsible for Anna getting taken, they were responsible for a lot of the crap that went down with Booker. Yeah, Booker had a crappy life, but they basically forced him to give up his daughter by saying, hey, we'll pay off your debts. So, fast forward years and years into, I believe it was 1909. I went through all the, to get specific dates and specific things, I went through all their different voxophones to check out dates, and I believe 1909 was when Robert and Rosalind seemed to have looked through a Lutece device, and having played through the game, I understand the context of this voxophone now. It looks like they saw the future of 1980 or 1980 something, where old Elizabeth destroys the Earth. She rains hell upon Earth and sets fire to New York. And presumably the rest of the world too, because Comstock was insane. And then Robert was just like, oh crap, we screwed up big time. We basically initiated Armageddon. And he's like, we have to fix this. We have to bring Elizabeth back to Booker. We have to reunite them. And Rosalind, it's really interesting that they're the same person, yet their perspectives are so different. Robert is very much the optimist. He's like, we can fix this. We need to go back, and we need to we can't go back. They can't go back. They can't time travel unless they go to a different universe that's set in the past. But they need to get Elizabeth. They need to bring her back to Booker. Like, we need to reunite them. Rosalind felt it was almost pointless. Like, we'd just be delaying the inevitable, so what's the point? She was almost practically a fatalist at that point. Which is interesting, because she does go along with it. Now, we find out that Rosalind was pretty staunch on, I'm content, we're just going to sit here, we're going to do our science. Because, honestly, I think Rosalind has a bit of a codependency issue with Robert. I can kind of assume from her voxophones, because she's the only one we get voxophones from, since she's from the dimension we're going to, Robert came from another one, that she had very, very few friends, if any, and seemed to have no real connection to her family. There's no mention of a father, and the only mention of her mother is basically dismissive of, her dream, which she saw as a career in the beginning of her career in physics. So we have her discovering not only someone who's that she could connect with, but literally her, but a gender meant her, a man who was literally her, Robert. They knew they had the same interests, they had the same love for science. Like, she could connect with someone, and I really think that once she got him over to her side, she was like, I don't want anything else. Like, I really think that she was very much just content with letting things be. She didn't want to do anything. She didn't want to try to involve any complications of morals. She just wanted to sit here and do science. So Robert did what he knew was the only way to get Rosalind to help him. Threaten to leave. Just leave. Probably go into another dimension and never see her again. Of course, Rosalind was like, no. She would have no one. And she would have no one. she obviously didn't really care for much anyone else at that point. I don't really think it was until a little while later that she actually was like, okay, maybe I do want to help. But at the time, that was what drove her to help him. So in 1909, if I remember correctly, they were gonna go and travel between dimensions and, reunite Booker and Elizabeth. But something went wrong. Comstock found out. Comstock had the Lutece device sabotaged. And kablooey. Lutece is dead. Right? That's it. Nothing happens. Wrong! They get scattered. Well, what Rosalind assumes is they got scattered upon all dimensions and can now freely move between any dimension they choose. Rosalind was ecstatic. Hey, we get to be together forever! And then Robert's like, Grant, crap. Now how are we going to help them? Now, I don't know. This is never particularly explained. But it seems like Robert and Rosalind felt they were incapable of actually helping Booker and actually helping Elizabeth and getting them reunited and making sure that Comstock's plans don't come to fruition. Which is a change of pace from what Rosalind originally said. She doesn't care if he takes over the world or whatever. That's his whatever he does with our technology is his prerogative. I just want to make it. Which is actually very interesting. Makes me think of the doctor. I forgot. Played by Rachel Weisz in The Bourne Legacy, where she was just like, I just do the science. I'm not involved in any of the actual things that kill people. And he's just Jeremy Renner's character. So else has I've seen the movie, but yeah, he's just like, what the hell do you mean? I'm relying on you to get me for these drugs. But yeah, it was very much like that, where she just didn't care what happened with her science as long as she got to do the science. Because she saw it as innocent discovery. Eventually, it's obvious she changed her tune once she realized that Comstock tried to kill them. So, that is what led them to the state we see them in the main game. So they can move between dimensions. And it's, like I said, it's not really explained why they couldn't do this themselves. But they did. But Rosalind did. I think she was saying something about how they couldn't do it, but they could get Booker to do it. And this is what I believe led to them getting Bookers and trying to rescue Elizabeth's. What with them pulling strings to help along the way, like we see them doing the main game, saying, hey, yeah, this guy's dead here, but cross over to this dimension, he's alive. But there are a few complications with that. So, while you move the plot forward a little, then you veer sideways. It's complicated, really. Now, Booker I can assume that their original plan was to fill them in on what was going on. Okay, we're the people who stole your daughter 20 years ago, so sorry about that, but she's right over here, we can help you get her. And then they would try to help him get to Columbia. Two problems. One, Booker was so traumatized by selling Anna that he completely forgot he had a daughter. He seems to barely remember, he seems to only remember he had a wife at some point, but not, yeah, we had a daughter that I sold because I was in severe debt. So they can't really just say, hey, we have your daughter, and he'd be like, what daughter? And they're just like, Mr. DeWitt, why? The second problem is when they brought him to the other dimension, he was totally out of it. Like, his mind was so fried when coming over that his mind was basically pulling fragments to try to piece together what was going on. Luteces, hey, bring us the girl, wipe away the debt, which is a phrase that it seems like they ended up using that to their advantage by trying to say, okay, the people who want you to do this are very bad and they will hurt you and they will kill people. And I didn't let also the implication that the Luteces killed the Columbia lighthouse guard and then tied him up and put a sign on him that says, don't fail us, or something. It was something along those lines. It's been a while since I played the game. But we know the Luteces really aren't like that. They're too jovial to really seriously pull a threat like that. Because They're just trying to reunite. And that's what I believe their motivation is. They want to reunite Booker with Elizabeth. But doing so is so ridiculously complicated, they can't just get Booker and Elizabeth together. Crap happens. Now, I'm going to have to, once I go through a bit of the game, I'm going to have to sidestep into Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea, because the way I piece these together and the way my theory works is it requires knowledge of what happened in Burial at Sea to understand the ending of Bioshock Infinite, which is mind-screwy and surreal all its own. So, the Luteces obviously have been doing this for a while. If we can assume they immediately started in 1909, we're in 1912, which means they've been doing this for about 3 years. Excuse me. 3 years of constantly trying to save Elizabeth with Booker's. How many times it was successful? It's really hard to tell. It's never really specifically stated of how many times a Booker is. We know that plenty of Bookers have failed, especially with Elizabeth's lines of, "Cat, no. The cat's going to mess up my tripod." But we know that a lot of Bookers have failed. We know that at least the times when Booker has tried to directly fight Songbird, he loses, as what Elizabeth said. "You can't beat him. I've seen it. You die, or you'll always fail," or something like that. But so all what really matters, though, is all that really matters is what's going on with the Booker we're playing as. Isn't that's the one that we're invested in. That's the one we really care about. So crap happens, and it's obvious that they've been doing this for quite a while. They show up at the right times, and I honestly believe this is more of a trial and error. This is the 100th and something Booker that that they're helping. So they've gone through this a lot of times, so they know if X happens, Y happens. If Y happens, Z happens. But if Y doesn't happen, W happens. So they're like, okay, we know what's going to happen, so we're here to help you, and hopefully things don't go bad. But one thing that we can assume is from the ending with the Among the Sea of Doors, we see plenty of Bookers and plenty of Elizabeths. Cat, stay. But we don't know. We don't know exactly how all this happened. Now, one of the things I don't like the idea is that a lot of people have spread that every single universe ends up in the exact same predicament, the exact same ending, just because of a line from Elizabeth I believe it's along the lines of, with infinite universes and infinite possibilities, did we ever even have a choice? And yes, there is a choice, but when you're being directed by the Luteces, they're trying to get to a specific outcome. Booker with Elizabeth. We need to get them together, we need to get them safe, and we need to stop this crap that's going with Comstock. But it's so complicated. Just trying to get this Elizabeth. It's like everything in the universe is fighting them, saying, no, this isn't supposed to happen. But the Luteces fight it anyway, because the Luteces are like, science will prevail. But then eventually some of them do succeed. And I do think that what happens with the tower getting destroyed and Elizabeth's full powers awakening of being able to just step into different dimensions without a single problem, creating whole new dimensions with the wave of her hand. I believe it happens a lot. I believe it happened especially with their first ones. But they had a problem. Elizabeth loses her mind. And I believe, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my Booker and Elizabeth video, but I did talk about this in my, in a post I made on Tumblr, which I will actually link to that below since it's relevant to Burial at Sea Elizabeth, saying that with Elizabeth gaining her powers, her full powers, she basically goes Dr. Manhattan. And if for those of you who don't know and have never seen or read Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan was a guy who, through science, basically became a super being. became a super being. And he experiences time in a non-linear fashion. He sees everything all at once. So basically, things didn't really, like, reality didn't matter as much to him. He was entirely careless about everything. He was a complete dick, in all honesty. But that's kind of what happened with Elizabeth. She basically saw all these dimensions all at once, and her sense of reality got warped.
Hi, Darcy.
And she basically kind of went crazy. She killed Booker. And then the Luteces are probably just like, after we were so close, you just killed Booker. Why? The whole goal, they've been spending all this time trying to get Booker and Elizabeth together, and Elizabeth was just like, if I kill Booker, everything's okay. And it's just like... So then, this is where Burial at Sea comes in. Burial at Sea very heavily implies the Luteces were leading Elizabeth onto a very, very bad path. Now, we know that Daisy Fitzroy is a complete psychopath. Totally cool, killing, slaughtering innocent civilians who, their worst crime is they're racist. But is it really worth killing someone over? I mean, as Booker himself said, the only difference between Fitzroy and Comstock is how you spell the names. Daisy Fitzroy fell into the he who fights monsters issue of she was fighting so hard against Comstock that she became the very monster she was fighting. And this is actually what happened with Burial at Sea Elizabeth. She wanted to just slaughter Comstocks. And she became so obsessed with this, she went after the Burial at Sea Booker, who was a former Comstock himself, and got his Anna killed. But after that, he was so torn up from it that he just threw it all away. He went back to being Booker. He ran to Rapture. He wanted to forget it. So he's been dedicating his life to helping people and helping, especially, helping girls in a way to, even if he forgot, he wanted to help girls in the way that he screwed up the life of Anna. So Elizabeth hunts him down, even though he's very sorry about it, and she soullessly watches him get impaled by a Big Daddy, which led to her own getting impaled by a Big Daddy. And her coming back, which I can only assume is some sort of doppelganger she created exactly of herself. It was in this sort of limbo dimension. That itself isn't particularly explained, but it's implied it's some sort of really messed up respawn ability. But she doesn't have her powers, so she's going to have to outsmart everyone. Now, what I believe the book that the Luteces were doing is the Luteces were picked on Elizabeth, an earlier Elizabeth. After several Bookers had died, they were like, we need to make Elizabeth realize that killing Booker is a bad idea. So they picked this earlier Elizabeth. Now, I need to say that right now, I believe Burial at Sea Elizabeth and the Bioshock Infinite Elizabeth are completely two separate people. I believe this completely. I believe these two entirely separate people have no connections to each other outside of name. This is a fairly early Elizabeth, or maybe things happened at the same time, but whatever. We don't really know exactly how these dimensions reflect upon each other. But point is, they picked an Elizabeth. They needed to make an example out of her. The ends justify the means. If we lead one Elizabeth and a Booker down a horrible path, and sacrifice a handful of people, we can save all the Bookers and Elizabeths from all the different dimensions, or at least the ones that gain their full powers and would lead Elizabeth to killing Booker. So they basically pick an Elizabeth, and they set up everything to make her fall into this path that they had seen other Elizabeths go on. The Daisy Fitzroy that from her universe, since this is separate from the universes, like the Columbia we see in Burial at Sea is not the Columbia, the Revolution timeline where the Vox were powerful enough to fight against the founding fathers. is different from the one we saw in the main game. This is this Elizabeth. I believe this is this Elizabeth's timeline. She sees the Luteces convincing Daisy to take the child, which forces Elizabeth to stab her. And she doesn't want to. The Luteces, something interesting that the Luteces say. What is more important, your role in the play or the play itself? Why would they refer to this as a play? Surely this isn't just... Like, we all know that all the world's a stage, but who's the audience? What, the Booker and Elizabeth that are walking by and she's going to talk to them? They needed her to match up to other daisies and from different dimensions, and people need to remember there are possibly millions of daisies across millions of different versions and millions of Columbias, all that are slightly or even very different. This daisy needed to be pushed to act more similarly to other daisies. She needed to be as much of a psychopath, so they needed to have her look like she was going to kill the kid, like the one we saw in the main game was, leading Elizabeth to kill her, and what would eventually lead her to becoming the darker Elizabeth that we see in Burial at Sea. When Elizabeth falls into that path, she becomes a very horrible person. She becomes as much of a monster as Comstock was. She kills people who are innocent and doesn't care. She didn't care if Sally died. She really didn't. She was ready. She didn't care if Sally got roasted alive in the vents, as long as she got to kill Booker. As long as she got to kill Comstock. That's all she cared about. She had fallen. She was a villain, honestly. She was a villain in episode 1 of Burial at Sea. She only being a protagonist in episode 2 when she started realizing, crap, I was wrong. But, like I said, who is the audience? Why would they be doing all of this? Why would they be leading this Elizabeth on this path and refer to it as a play? Would they be doing it? The Luteces aren't people who would be like, yeah, let's just slaughter people and laugh about it. They're not psychopaths. They're weirdos, but they're not psychopaths. I mean, because if you really take that idea, and I have seen people play this idea forward, that the Luteces are just monsters who want everyone dead and as revenge. Which really doesn't make sense, because like I said before, the Luteces are responsible for everything. If Rosen and Robert never built the Lutece device and never made the Lutece particle, the events of Bioshock Infinite would not happen. Booker and Anna would still be together, whatever that ended up being like, if it ended up being good or bad, they would be together. Comstock would never cross dimensions. He would never gain the incredible power he had. So the Luteces trying to exact revenge on everyone makes them off as massive hypocrites. Like, you want revenge for the stuff you did? And Rosalind herself said she didn't care, so she enabled Comstock to do this crap. So I don't believe the Luteces are not stupid. They're not selfish and stupid enough to think, oh, if I kill everyone else that suffered and were enabled by things I did, then that makes me right. No. So they wanted to help in their own complicated way, because after seeing how things go absurdly, how badly things could go, they needed to try to fix things. So they lead the Burial at Sea Elizabeth down a path that other Elizabeths have taken, but they needed control of this. They needed to make things go exactly how they needed to. So they made her what other Elizabeths had become, maybe even worse, to make a point. So that other Elizabeths who gain their powers and see all the dimensions, see what happened in Burial at Sea, see how much Elizabeth suffered because she killed Booker, and not kill Booker. Elizabeth does not realize how much Booker really means to her. This is something I love. This is one of the most emotional parts of episode 2. She's sitting there and she's just like, Booker is the one who really cared about me. Of all these people I'm getting hurt and manipulated by, Booker is the only person who ever really cared. And what now this is interesting. The beginning of episode 2, what does she do? Who does she hallucinate to, I'm guessing, reflect knowledge she knows in her subconscious, but may not actively know, to help her through? It's Booker! She loves Booker. Booker's her father. He cared about her. But she killed him under some misguided idea that she could stop what's going on if she killed Booker. Which may have been basically her experiencing dimensions in a different way and being overwhelmed with all her power, because she's like, boom, boom, yeah, warping dimensions all over with when she first gains her powers, because she first goes and Songbird's coming up, she's just like, whoop, we're in Rapture now. And Booker's just like, sitting underwater? Ridiculous. So Elizabeth, they needed the play is for all Elizabeths who fully gain their powers and would be led down the path to kill Booker. To let them see, this is what happens if you do this. You see, this Elizabeth, she killed Booker, and they made sure that she went along these lines of the sufferings to bring out her to say, I miss Booker. It was like, and that's something that was so incredibly heartbreaking about episode 2 of Burial at Sea. Elizabeth realizes that she cares about Booker. She imagines Booker. Booker helps her, and she practically begging him for, any kind of like response, and she was just like, I missed you, Booker, and she's just like, answer me. And then Booker's just like, I'm not real, I'm in your head. And she's just like, I don't care. Because she misses him, and it's so heartbreaking. And this is what Elizabeth needed to see. If you let Booker die, you become a heartless monster. You lose yourself to your powers. And it's so terrible to see. And it's obviously something the Luteces would not want. And actually, one line that I thought was interesting was when, if Elizabeth dies in episode 2, I know there's one line where I think Rosalind says it's the end of the DeWitt Comstock line. And at first I thought, there's this idea that she's the last Elizabeth, and that this is the last Comstock, which doesn't work, because infinite universes and infinite possibilities. There can't just be one left. There's always going to be, it's like, this is the problem with an infinite multiverse. You can't just say this is the last one, because multiverse dictates there are a bajillion different other universes where these same people are going through the exact same thing, and a bajillion more where things are completely different. But then an idea hit me. They failed. They couldn't get things to where they wanted to be. So they failed, and Elizabeth's will kill Booker's, and it's rather depressing, honestly. So they succeed. She realizes how much she cares about Booker. She ends up dying at the hands of Atlas after giving him the phrase. And hell, maybe the Luteces were also trying to make sure that things went smoothly in Bioshock 1, that things needed to happen a specific way. Especially in a little side note, I did have an idea for a live-action Bioshock miniseries that actually had cameos of the Luteces in Bioshock 1 and 2. That's neither here nor there, but that's just an interesting idea to have. The Luteces being involved in the other games. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Luteces are so interesting to talk about. So they get that, they succeed. Elizabeth dies, and she sees Jack. I love this part. And this is one thing I really like, is that it absolutely 100% canonizes the good ending of Bioshock 1, which we all know. I mean, no one's going to say, oh yeah, I really wanted the bad ending of Bioshock 1, or Jack is evil. Like, it portrays him as something of a savior of the Little Sisters, and I like that. I like good Jack. Good Jack is best Jack. So that's the end of the story. We go back now to the ending of the ending of BioShock Infinite. From when Elizabeth gains her powers to the absolute ending of Booker drowning. We see here that Elizabeth suddenly has a lot more knowledge now, and she makes Booker face his past. He straight up is like, no, I want to go to Paris. I want to go to Paris. I don't want to face my past. I don't want to do that. I want to do that. I run away. That's what I do. I'm Booker DeWitt. I run away from my problems. And she makes him face it. It's like, and she was basically like, you are my father. And she makes him realize at the very end, and he was just like, and she makes him realize what really went down, where the phrase, bring us the girl, wipe away the debt, came from. The Lutece's involvement, him trying to take Anna back after he realized, crap, my debts are not worth my daughter, and tries to save her only to get pushed back by Comstock, and he watches Anna get taken and her pinky get cut off. So he faces this past, and this is where Burial at Sea comes in. Elizabeth has the prime opportunity to kill Booker. Booker wants to kill Comstock. He wants to smother him in his crib. But he doesn't know, and the player doesn't know in their first playthrough, that Comstock was Booker. He was that universe's Booker. So you end up with the morbid idea of him trying to kill himself, but he doesn't know that. And it really pains me. Booker, at that point, is the only person who doesn't know. The Luteces know. They were like, well, he's not going to like this. Or I don't remember what Robert and Rosalind say. They're basically saying he's not going to enjoy this next part where he finds out that he's Comstock. So Elizabeth, this is the part. Elizabeth could kill Booker. He would walk into this to kill Comstock and then walk into what I believe is a pocket dimension. It's too surreal to be any normal dimension. So Elizabeth creates the pocket dimension of the baptism area. Now, she could just drown Booker right here and there, let him walk in. But one thing you notice, though, that Elizabeth we see in there is not Elizabeth. She's not wearing the pendant on her neck. Neither the cage nor the bird. None of the Elizabeths there are, which we can assume are different Elizabeths of different timelines. But she pulls them all together, and because when I first watching it, I was just like, what is going on? Elizabeth's pulling things. It's supposed to be surreal. This is all the lead up to basically telling Booker, you're Comstock. Or, well, Comstock was Booker. This pocket dimension, I believe she was creating to reveal to him that he was Comstock. I keep saying that. Comstock was a Booker. It's so weird. It gets complicated when you're really thinking about it. Because I remember when I first saw it, I was just like, what? But really thinking about it, a lot of stuff makes sense. Especially the talking about being a wounded knee and stuff. And then, what's his name? Cornelius Slate. He was just like, Comstock wasn't there. Yeah, he was, man. His name was Booker DeWitt at the time. But, I mean, when that Booker was essentially a doppelganger. She created doppelgangers in this, and that when he died, Booker basically saw this happening from the outside of that door, and his nose would bleed. And this is where I really believe the ending. This is my theory of the ending. It was all done so that Elizabeth would not kill Booker. Everything. BioShock Infinite and Burial at Sea was all so that Elizabeth would not kill Booker. That he would realize what happened. He would realize that she's his daughter. She would realize that Comstock was another version of Booker, and that trying to kill him is tantamount to suicide. Now, granted, he already did kill a Comstock. He bashed his head in a basin. But, it's just like, ultimately, Booker, you need to let this go. You can't fight another version of yourself. You can't. Trying to kill Comstock is pointless. As Elizabeth found out trying to kill Comstock is pointless. What does it do? It leads to misery. You're just she basically just became a serial killer. Elizabeth became a serial killer in Barry Let's See. With some influence in the Lutece, I believe, to make sure that she went down that path so that other Elizabeths would be like, okay, not going to do that. I'm going to keep Booker alive because I realize that other me's have tried this, and when I do this, I miss him. Because their relationship is very important. So, that is what I believe with motivation of the Luteces. I don't know how long this video is, but I'm sure this is a pretty long video. I've been trying to figure out how I want to put this for the last week. But yeah, I think I covered most everything, because once you like piece together everything, things. I don't believe this is nearly as bleak as it tends to be. But I understand why some people, like a number of people in the BioShock fandom, misinterpret this as a really, 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 really depressing ending and a really depressing, game. BioShock 1 and 2 were very straightforward. They had a whole bunch of backstory, things you could get from picking up audio diaries. And things that you could find out and piece together. And yeah, there were plot twists, like Jack was a clone, or not a clone, but he was a child of Andrew Ryan, who was genetically altered to be a full-grown adult at 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old, I should say. And then the story itself is very, very straightforward. BioShock 2, it's also very straightforward. But BioShock Infinite is very much not. And people who are used to BioShock 1 and 2 would be tempted to look at this as a very, very, very straightforward story. Well, Elizabeth killed Booker. That's it. That's the ending. After going so surreal, it almost felt like Metal Gear Solid 2. But it wasn't bad like Metal Gear Solid 2. You're just sitting there like, what just happened? Because I was really upset. I was really upset when I first ended my first playthrough, especially after loving the ending of... I got the very, very good ending of BioShock 2. And I was crying because of how much I love that ending. And then when I finished BioShock Infinite, I was upset. Like, is this how it ends? It was like, this is how it ends? Like, everything, like, what? Elizabeth just kills Booker and that's it? Like, I was so mad. Until Tumblr user Punk Rockula explained to me how she saw the endings, and I'm like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Because that's very much more like how that's what BioShock is like. And then there's the extra bit at the end. Post-credits, where you see Booker is in, essentially, it almost seems a little bit like the dream world where he seems to go back in time and then he goes into the room and he's just like, Anna? And then it cuts off, all Inception-like and stuff. So it doesn't actually tell you if Elizabeth, or if Anna is still there, because if he sold her or not. But I believe, now, from what I see of that, I think that the doppelganger Booker that she created that died didn't really die. She kind of recreated that pocket universe to basically be his life then. Because she can create universes. We've known this for a good while, because I believe this is stated in notes about her. She used to be able to do this. She could just create entirely new worlds. So she basically, I think Elizabeth did this to give this doppelganger Booker a life. She basically recreates everything to be 1893, right? Yeah, 1893, because Elizabeth was 1 year old. Because she was born in 1912, or 1892, because she's 20 in 1912. And then she basically gives him, a chance to raise Elizabeth in a way that it give him a chance at the life he didn't have. A happy ending. Multiple happy endings. endings. And then Elizabeth can go to Paris, Elizabeth with her Booker can go to Paris, and the Luteces can apologize. And this is something I really want. I really want the Luteces to apologize, because they're the reason this all happened. Which is one of the reasons why I don't believe that they would, like, that by the end of Burial at Sea, if you go with this idea that the Luteces are bad, everyone's dead. Everyone's dead and they're the last one standing. And what's the point? And really, at that point, you might be saying, well, what's even the point of investing in Bioshock Infinite if all it ends with is everyone dead except for the Luteces standing on top of a pile of corpses, sipping tea, going, yeah, we're the smartest people. Like, that's so unsatisfying, and it's not Bioshock. Bioshock, despite its bleakness and darkness at points, is a fairly optimistic series, building good endings out of bad things. The good ending of Bioshock 1. Jack is a freak, a genetic experiment, but what does he do? He raises 5 little sisters to be happy, and he gives them, what Tenenbaum said, the chance that they never had. A life. And then in, I guess I will spoil the ending of, the good ending of Bioshock 2, so if you don't want to see that, then you can just skip this part. Because this is near the end, and I've already pretty much answered everything. But yeah, at the ending of Bioshock 2, as Delta dies, and Eleanor absorbs his essence to basically so that, you know, he can still essentially, at least in spirit, be with her, she basically vows to follow his example to help people, because she saves Sophia Lamb's life, and she saves her mother's life, even though she's an absolute monster psychopath who just wants to kill everyone and gain power out of some flawed idea that she can create a utopia out of rapture. Like, really? Andrew Ryan already tried that. It failed. But she saves Sophia Lamb. She promises to do good. She promises to follow Delta's example, to be as good of a person as he was, and which I was legitimately in tears. Like, I was bawling at that ending. Like, I was just like, you can ask Punk Rockula about that. We were both playing through the game at the same time, and, you know, she could probably hear my crying, my loud, obnoxious crying about that part. And then you have Bioshock Infinite. That it makes more sense to say that after all the crap they went through, Booker and Elizabeth got to be together. That they got to at least live their life, the rest of their lives in peace together. Booker got to be with his daughter again. After 20 years of repressed memories and alcoholism, he finally gets to do better now. He finally gets his chance to do better. And the double Booker that from the end is in scene is, you know, he gets his chance to raise Anna from the point he gave her up, to say, I'm going to do better for you, because, you know, I have a chance, I have a second chance. And that's so much more Bioshock, isn't it? That makes so much more sense. That sure, the Luteces may have been doing some unsavory things, but it was all for a greater good. The greater good. But it's like, when the Luteces would think that, you know, sure, we may have been doing some questionable things, but we really care, and we really want things to end up good. So we want to help as many Elizabeths and as many Bookers as we can, even if it's a really, really painful road to go down to, especially when Booker has to face his past that he'd been rejecting for 20 years. So yeah, I've been talking for a while. I don't know how long I've been talking, but yeah, that is what I believe the motivation of the Luteces were. It's simply to get Booker and Elizabeth together, and in some ways to stop Comstock. Because, really, if all they wanted was revenge on Comstock, they could have just killed any Comstock they wanted. They can teleport behind him, stab, goodbye. Teleport behind him, push him off Columbia, goodbye. They could have done it themselves, but they probably couldn't. They couldn't have Booker go on the journey, because if they just brought Elizabeth to Booker, he would just be like, who the hell are you? And she'd be like, who the hell are you? Though they probably needed them to go on that adventure together to grow their bond, and by the end of the game they did have a strong bond. I just wish that Booker hugged her at once. Booker, hug your freaking daughter. But yeah, their motivation was to help them. It was just the means of doing so was so obscure because everything that was going on was fighting against them. So they had to play every single card they had to get everything to work. And who knows how many times they've done this? Who knows how many Bookers that they've helped? And who knows how many Bookers succeeded? We know at least one other Booker died in the Vox timeline, where he died as Booker DeWitt, Martyr of the Revolution, which was merely propaganda invented by Daisy to rally people to her cause, because Booker didn't give a crap about them. He just wanted to get Elizabeth. So, yeah, I mean, I've talked my head off on this topic, and I knew this is going to be one of the more complicated topics that I was going to talk about, but I've been really excited ever since I got this topic. I mean, I know I've said this a lot with these video game topics. I've been waiting to do these. This is something I've been so excited to talk about because I really want to get this idea out there. So many people, I think, take the wrong interpretation from BioShock Infinite, and I don't like the super depressing ideas they come up with. Because even if it was true, I would never accept it. It's so bleak and it's so depressing, and by the end of it, it makes you feel crappy. It's like watching Watchmen. When I watched the movie, I came out of that movie so upset. Like, I was so mad. Like, because I felt resentful for liking comic book heroes. It's like, and that's not what you shouldn't watch a comic book movie or even read a comic book and feel like that. And that's kind of what the initial impression of BioShock Infinite is. This makes me feel crappy for liking BioShock because it's so utterly depressing. And that can't be it, because BioShock is not depressing. BioShock is bleak, but it always has a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what it is. And I believe that their motivations for the Luteces were good, even if they had to do a lot of bad things to make them happen. Because they couldn't go back in time to create their, to stop their mistakes. They couldn't go back 20 years and go up to their past selves and be like, okay, don't do this. Don't help this Comstock guy. This is bad. So they did the next best thing. They just tried to correct their mistakes. And they tried to give Booker and Elizabeth the life that they robbed from them. This is a chance to be together and for Booker to raise his daughter. Okay. Alright, I'm done. I don't know how long this is, but it's probably pretty long. If you want to submit a topic, just go on YouTube, just comment below. Or if you're on Tumblr, just send me an ask. And put topic, and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just make sure it's fictional. I don't want to talk about real world stuff. And make sure it's something specific about that I can, talk about it. And not just give me a, hey, why do you like X? Give me something specific to talk about. And just remember to follow the rules that I have posted on my blog, which I'll link to below. So, yes, next week we conclude with the last video game topic of Christmas month. And it will be over Metroid Other M. This will be the more controversial, because this game is controversial. But I am excited to talk about that, because I have a lot to say about it. Good and bad. So, yes. Thank you for watching, and I hope... please watch my next video.